Started going to USM in pretty much just after high school, 2004, and I started as pre-med, and then that was not working out for me at all. And I took the rest of the semester off, and then restarted back up in the winter semester, and then just went for art, and it was great. I needed to be there. I don't know what I was thinking before. Growing up with a chronic condition, and I thought, maybe that's a place for me. And I think all along what was important and vital to coping with that condition growing up was creativity. So I kind of had to make that connection later on. I basically focused on photography and art history. And then I kind of, from the art history classes, tried to pull out classes that focused on like visual literacy and how to read images. And so that became really important part of my process. So having the dual program is just so responsible for how I make my work today. I had some really great mentors at USM in the art department. Specifically, I can look to Rose Marasco. She was the chair of the photo department while I was there, and Jennifer McDermott. She's an amazing adjunct professor there, just super wonderful. And Duncan Hewitt in sculpture. I actually still work with him today. I help him with his website now. And it's nice because at USM I feel like I've been able to continue the connections I've had with my mentors there into post-college life, and that these people and these professors and these artists are actually living, working artists who are involved in the community. So it's like I see them again. Basically, after I graduated in 2010, I took 5 years off from straight up art making for me, and I needed that time to do some other things and figure out what I really wanted to make work about. So I spent that time creating a creativity enrichment program that I did with people in the Bleeding Stores community across the country. So we did exhibitions and talked about visual literacy and seminars and sessions, that kind of thing, and then would make work with kids and help them learn how to read the image. And then from there, I got to this point where I was doing a lot of graphic design and web development and shooting, photographing houses for people. And that was great, it was paying the bills, but I got to this point, really hit the head of it back in March 2015 when I was like, I need to make my own work again, and kind of started formulating an idea. Well, I've always had this long-running obsession, if you will, with Iceland, and that started really in 1997. And I'll be very candid about it. I'm a huge Björk fan, and loving her and being a fan of her music, and I think sort of being in that like tempestuous teen years experience, she got me through that, I guess. But then it kind of grew into this other thing where I really was learning about Iceland and wanting to go there. But I think, I grew up in Biddeford. I live in Portland now, but we didn't really have a whole lot of opportunity to travel and do these things, so I didn't actually get to go for the first time to Iceland until May 2014. The second time we came back, we went and drove by Commercial Street, and we see these Eimskip containers down the waterfront, and we're like, wait, we saw those before. And my friend Gwen says to me, wasn't that weird? Like, it was like Iceland had just followed us home. And so I'm like, what are they doing here? What's going on with this? And it took me about 5 months to really let that percolate. And then in March 2015, I was about to see Björk in concert, and we were having a drink in a bar, and I thought, I need to make work about this. This is what I can do. I can figure out what's going on down there. And certain things have fleshed out since then, and in terms of what I wanted to do, but really the first idea was make portraits of people who were involved in that, and that's what I've done so far. 1 week later, I called Dana Eidsness at the Maine International Trade Center, and she chairs a program, or runs a program, called the Maine North Atlantic Development Office, and she hooked it up. I mean, within a month, I was meeting the U.S. ambassador to Iceland and the Icelandic ambassador to the United States, and I was meeting with two women who are running a magazine about the North Atlantic. So, I mean, just timing, serendipity, it all kind of came together. I don't think I would have been as comfortable calling a trade center, which is a business entity, if I was so immersed in an art-only world. I think I was sort of used to already this combination of different sectors and different disciplines being in the same place and sort of knowing that we can cohabitate, which is sort of very similar to the experience at USN. The next step, and this is sort of how I was able to legitimize the project, was I applied for a Maine Arts Commission grant for an individual artist project, and I got it. And that really, in the eyes of all of these other players involved, all the sort of more official business entities, they began to, I think, take me a little more seriously. And then from there, they invited me to go on the ship and go across the North Atlantic for 9 days from Portland, Maine to Reykjavik. Part of this whole art process has been making this work on the ship, and I used film and digital and podcasting to kind of make this multimedia project. But the invisible part that you don't see is and I really truly consider it to be part of the process, is how I navigate these entities that are all involved in this, the stakeholders. You have the Maine National Trade Center, you have the Maine North Atlantic Development Office, you have SOLI DG, and they sort of are starting up this new project called the New England Ocean Cluster. And so who are all the players, and basically making those relationships happen is just as important as getting on the ship and taking a picture too. The only thing they were telling me before I went was that I needed to be a little careful about where I sat in the mess hall during dinner and during meals, because everyone has their specific spot, and that the crew didn't really speak English, and that they're rough and tough, and they're not going to be really warm to me. But I think now I know they were probably just telling a joke, because they were so wonderful. They were really welcoming and at any point willing to talk to me about any questions they had. There was definitely some folks who didn't want to talk to me that much. And I think there was a directive from the captain to try to be, as open as they can with me, but that also they just need to tell me if they don't want to talk to me, and then I would respect that, and that was the sort of understanding that we had. I really only had one white whale, if you will, on board, and that was Ole Bjørnson, and he, this older guy, he's like 70, and you can maybe see him in the photo right there, and he didn't really want to talk, and it wasn't because he didn't want to share his experience with me. It was more so that he was uncomfortable with English, and so eventually he was able to get Yona, the only woman on board the ship, to translate for him, and we had a really great kind of more relaxed conversation that way. So these are 10 images that I'm going to show in a preview exhibition coming up, but they'll also be part of the whole Green Line exhibition at some point. For the framing choice, or for the display option, I kind of like to go generally with an acrylic or plexiglass face mount, and to me it creates this situation where the photos feel more like objects themselves versus being within the frame and under a mat, where you're sort of you're a little bit more removed from the photo, not having a more direct engagement. So I like that they kind of float off the wall. It just feels very like an artifact of some kind. That's the whole point of the portraits, is to sort of elevate these seafarers and to honor their humanity on the ship, and that they exist all the time in this liminal space, that they're always there, we don't ever think of them. And so I think to make sure that when they're represented, we sort of express that in the quality and in the presentation is also important. So this is the studio upstairs, and it's like a kind of a sanctuary to get away from the dogs downstairs that are loud and barking. You've got light table, cutter. We have the Epson printer over here as well, which can do up to 4 feet wide, so it kind of gives me a lot of flexibility. While I wasn't making that work for 5 years, I was kind of saving up and trying to invest in my materials and get some equipment that was gonna free me up, because one of the hardest things is like figuring out where to make your prints. And sometimes you'll go to the bakery and go to the dark room if you need to do black and white, but color, it's a lot harder to do for sure. I definitely wanted to still make images with film, so it's really important that I got a combination during this trip, and I think for all my projects that there's this combination of film and digital. There's a quality to film, and a lot of people say this, but I totally agree that you just don't get in digital, and it also gives you the flexibility to print any size you want down the road. The other thing that changes when you switch from digital to traditional image making is that the experience and the interaction with the subject changes as well. So with digital, you can kind of be hidden more so. You don't have to let them know you're taking the photo. And generally, people are less aware of what you're doing, I guess. But when I take this guy out, everyone's like, whoa, what is that? That's a serious piece of equipment. It also slows me down. So I'm not taking as many pictures. I have 10 frames per roll of film, and I have to really super consider each frame as I make it. And so I usually like to save this for portraits, because that experience between me and the sitter really comes through in that moment. When I was on the ship, I basically made my portraits of everyone in the last 2 days I was on there, which was kind of a whirlwind because that's a lot. 11 portraits in 2 days is a little crazy. And they were all, in different places of the ship, and they were all working. So I had to earn, in the first 7 days, this relationship with them before I could really get the images that I wanted to make. People are like family to each other, and I think I can safely say by the end of it I was part of this crew, and so that was a nice feeling to have for sure. But it also meant that then I could make these images without having this necessarily, like, they knew I would do right by them, I think. I'd say the one thing that I would definitely make sure people try to remember is that business is not your enemy, and in fact business is who's gonna, down the road, even if it's 3 people removed or 3 entities removed, business is what funds are in some capacity. Not that you need to be cave to the system or not, rebuke the establishment or something, but be aware of how that works, because if you don't understand the connections, then you are just gonna be making paintings or work for yourself or whatever it may be, and you won't be able to show it anymore. I think as an artist, you have to figure out what it is that you want to make work about. And I think generally the shortcomings that a lot of artists come out with, and luckily USM, I think kids come out ahead because they do have that intersection of the liberal arts with their art education. But if you only make work for yourself, and I know that's important to some people, but if it's only always focused there, how are you contributing and how are you engaging with the world around you?